Well, I had an awesome weekend. I turned 40 on Saturday. We
I
went to our
know.
local Brazilian steakhouse. We know some of the waiters by first name, had an awesome time, ate tons of food. It's so funny. You go there starving and you think you're going to be there eating all the meat for like 4 hours. And there's this point, like 35 minutes in, where you take a bite and your chewing muscles don't work anymore for some reason. Hormones are so powerful. So I had a really, really, really nice weekend. John, how was your weekend?
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I wish you happy birthday on your birthday, so I don't have to say
You
happy
did. Thank you.
belated birthday. And my weekend, I went to the Low Carb USA in Boca Symposium for Metabolic Health. And anybody who follows me on Facebook or Twitter, I posted some pictures with some of the giants, with some of the cool doctors and nutritionists that I follow. They talked and then they were approachable. I went up with my camera. We talked. I took a selfie. I posted it. I sat here with the very computer that I'm using with the camera that's built in that I'm talking with you on. I'm sitting there ravenously, just typing away notes like I was a kid in school for each one of these speakers. I learned so much. And I have access, thanks to Low Carb USA. I have access to all the speeches and all their PowerPoints again if I want to click into them. So uh, I could talk to you from now till midnight with all the things I learned. It just was, I came home tired because I was just overloaded with so many cool things I didn't know. Wonderful. And then, of course, confirmations on all the things I do know about cholesterol and about A1C. And there was a big emphasis on diabetes type 1, which I didn't know anything about. And then they touched on type 2. And then the rest of the conference was about the keto, low carb eating and all the doctors' viewpoints. Some amazing people. You want me to share with you who I listened to? Um,
Absolutely.
all right, I may mispronounce some of their names, but Dr. Tro Kalargian, he runs this program. It's amazing. He has a bunch of people that work with him, Dr. Tro, and they have a system where you join. They have a support system. They have apps on their phone. You cannot fail, or it's very, very difficult to fail if you want to go keto, but you want help. And he shared his entire program, and his people talked. Beth McNally talked about diet implementation. Ian Lake was amazing about type 1 diabetes. Belinda Lenar, medication technology implementation. Allison Hershade was about hormonal changes for women in type 1. So it had nothing to do with me, but I wanted to listen to it. I have a friend whose daughter is a type 1 diabetic and was just diagnosed, and she's scared to death. So I feel like I have I feel like I can talk to her at least about some cool things that I learned. Dr. Eric Westman, uh, I got to meet him in person. He's such a nice guy. He wanted to have
So
dinner
nice.
with me. He actually said, "Let's do dinner." We didn't do it, but what a cool guy. Uh, let's see. He talked about Gary Taub's book, um, and his was about advances and challenges in type 1. Then Belinda Lenners, children living with diabetes. And then I got to finally see Dr. Cywes. Hey, Dr. Robert Cywes is the guy I'm going to talk a little bit about today when I discuss with you about addiction, because I got my knowledge from him. But he talked not about addiction on our conference. He talked about clinical implementations of a low carb diet in type 1 diabetes, because the focus was type 1 that day. Um, I got to go up and ask him. They had a microphone, and after the talks, people stand at the microphone, and there's rules. You have to state your name and where you're from, and you ask one question and step aside. And people
And
break.
did Doug reiterate those rules a bazillion times during the
Oh,
conference and have them
Doug. Okay, well, Doug is like the rule Nazi with that. He was hilarious because people were just saying they were starting to have a conversation and talk about themselves, and he's tapping them, stop, stop, stop.
Yep,
Um, oh, it's so cool. You knew who Doug was.
absolutely.
So I got to ask Dr. Cywes a few questions in person, which was so cool. He answered them for me. My question was about the hemoglobin A1C living longer, the red blood cells living longer when your body is healthier because you're carnivore.
That's
He
right.
basically shot me down and said he doesn't believe in that. That's what he said.
Oh, interesting.
He
Okay.
did. He did.
Hmm.
He used this little phrase that he says that he doesn't say the BS word, but he says there's a clinical word for that, and all his followers know what it is, and it's BS. But many other people do believe that. So I as an educated consumer of this information, it's my responsibility now to go on the Google machine and do my own research and maybe read some books. And I make my own decision because everybody has different opinions on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
All
Can I
right.
just
So,
chime in on that?
yeah, sure.
The pattern that I noticed when we talked about this last time, that your A1C dropped and then slowly started creeping up. I
Hmm.
see that pattern all the time for people who are carnivores. I've had a hard time believing that that's something pathological. I could be wrong, but that happens a lot where somebody might have a high A1C, they stop eating sugar, so it goes really low. And if
Right.
they start doing carnivore, it maybe gets down to like 4.8, but then it drifts to 4.9 to
Hmm.
5 to 5.1. I think you mentioned yours at 5.2. I don't
Right.
often see it go more than like 5.5, but I do see that pattern all the time. So interesting question.
It is. And you just described me. I was 5.8 when I first took it when I went keto, and it's crept up to 5.2. Now, I will see in a few years. Is it going to go up to 5.5, 5.65? Then I'm going to get worried. Maybe Dr. Cywes is right and I have carbohydrate restriction. You know how you talk about insulin resistance? Maybe it's carbohydrate resistance. That's his angle. And that you have to put some carbs back in. But, I'll tell you in a few years.
There you go.
But we'll see what happens. So let's see. Suzanne Schneider talked about cognitive and psychological implications of carbohydrates in type ones. We had Bruckner was amazing. Michael Hoffman. We had Mark Kuzella.
Kukazella.
Combat veterans and metabolic illness was the topic. It was really, and the angles that they came from to talk about how it improves that angle of a person's life was amazing. All right, Gurprit Pada. Okay, talk about stereotyping. I looked at the name and I thought, oh God, this guy's going to be boring. He's probably going to have a hard accent for me to understand. Well, the guy got up there and we were glued. The man was amazing. The hormesis paradox. You know what hormesis is, right?
That's
It's
right.
like,
Yep.
if you do something like if I go and sprint really hard, that was like almost an extreme stress on my body and I'm breathing heavy. My heart is racing. I feel like I'm going to die. And then there's a equal and opposite reaction that's very good for your body. So he talked about all these things, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Blew my mind away. What a fascinating guy. And then Ben Bickman. All right.
Oh,
The PowerPoint Pro, because I taught PowerPoint. You should see everybody's PowerPoints compared to this guy. And he is right on time. He times himself. He tells a joke every couple of minutes to keep your attention. He's on it. He was amazing. And his was shrinking fat cells, energy versus insulin.
mm,
Amazing, amazing. Dr. Tro and his group were up there. Philip Ovadia, I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book,
yeah.
going to keep you off my operating table. He's the thoracic surgeon, and he spoke. I got to meet him. Dr. Eric Berg, who has like 11 million followers. Again, what a friendly man. Shook my hand, spent time to talk with me, asked
Awesome.
me questions about me, right? Took a selfie. He talked about why is keto attacked? All the people that are attacking keto and all the reasons that people say it's bad for you. We see all these videos. It's going to kill you. Blah blah blah. Dominic DiAgostino. I didn't realize he lived so close to me here in South Florida.
That's right.
Got to meet him on the emergency applications of biomarker monitoring. So he talked about all the, like my Apple Watch and the ring that you sleep, the Aura ring, and all these really cool things to hack into your to find out how you're doing and change things. The other question that I got to ask, I asked uh, Dr. DiAgostino about C-peptide instead of fasting insulin, and he said it's a better test
Hmm,
because they never
good
mentioned
to
C-peptide, and that's the one that my doctor said that my insurance would pay for. And I
know. Wow.
found that out through Kim Howerton's book, Common Sense Labs. I mean, so I'm telling you, knowledge is power. You don't know these things unless you dip your toes in the water and find out. The other question I asked was, will taking exogenous ketones cause our body to not make our own ketones naturally? And I asked that question of Dr. DiAgostino because Dr. Cywes pushes his ketone IQ exogenous ketones and swears by them. And, I didn't know, maybe they're fine, but what if I take them and then my body says, oh, I'm not going to make them anymore? And Dr. DiAgostino's viewpoint is that, yes, that does happen. if you constantly take exogenous ketone esters, um, not coconut oil or MCT oil, but the actual ketones, you take a shot and you keep doing that, your body will stop making its own because it sees
Sure.
it on. And then
Makes sense.
it's slow to restarting. So, personally, I don't want to do it. And then the last guy to speak was David Diamond, right? I've
Mm.
heard of him. I read some of his articles, and he was outstanding. So he talked all about LDL. Okay, talk about a line of people at the microphone.
He's so awesome. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we talked the whole LDL, small LDL, large LDL, the ApoB, we refuting the different doctors. So yes, I walked away in
Yeah.
a whirlwind of I have to come home and decompress.
Yep.
But so I just read just the titles off of my notes here that I shared with you, and
It's
it was phenomenal. It really was.
that's that's it's no surprise knowing Doug and knowing what a great job he does putting these things on and getting the guests he had. They're all amazing. The things so a lot of the same things stand out to me that stood out to you. I noticed that when I'm done, as much as I think I want to like go out to dinner with everybody and like visit, I need some quiet time. Like I try to sneak out like the back door and like go on an hour long walk or something because I just need to like process so much information. Tell me about being in the community. So if you could magic wand replace the topics, the people that were speaking were maybe something that you would have gone to a conference when you were teaching and it was about something educational that had nothing to do with nutrition whatsoever. There is still something there when you get in a group of those people, something different there. Can you talk about like the feeling of just being in the room with those people regardless of whatever the topic was?
It's I'm shy, okay? You'd never know it. And I'm an introvert, which means I get my energy from within. I don't get my energy from other people, but you'd never know it because I turn it on to talk to you. I learned how to do that as a teacher, okay? And I can do it very efficiently. But when it's all said and done, like you said, when it's all said and done and it's over, I plop on the couch. I'm drained. Everyone drained me. Being in the room with everybody drains me. Being in an airplane sitting next to people drains me. So, but going there, being shy, at first I was a little hesitant to go up and ask my first question. I got up to the microphone and you probably wouldn't have even recognized my voice because it came out like I was nervous. And the reason is they're all my peers in front of me. So you think subconsciously that they're critiquing your grammar and your vocabulary of the medicine and saying it wrong. And I'm like, ah. But after asking a few other questions, I built up my confidence as I always do. And the energy in the room is exciting because we all believe very similarly about carbohydrates, sugar, seed oils, oxalates. We have the knowledge. We're not in a room with all different people. And the way I know why that feels so electrifying and you get excited, there was this other woman that came there from Boca, and she was from New York, and she came in and she talked to me, and she heard that I was from Boca too, and she was overweight, and she was there to learn information, but she knew nothing about the ketogenic diet. I mean, she was there to learn, but she didn't know anybody. She never heard of any of the speakers, and I thought to myself, I try to empathize with people. It's like, what would it be like for me to be her in this room? And she must have felt like such a minority in that room. Whereas I, and probably everybody else in the room, that's our people. That's our tribe, right? It's our folks. So it was energizing. We fed off of each other. It was exciting. And the best times of the conference, even though taking notes and watching their PowerPoints and listening to the speakers, the most exciting times are the question and answer times and the little 10-minute breaks in between when you get to take pictures and talk to them one on one and go up to people. And they have vendors outside. They had the Keto Mojo people out there whom I met the guy 4 years ago at Austin KetoCon for the first time, and he spoke with me for 10 minutes then. And I said to him this time, I said, I don't know if you remember me, but we had a conversation, and he talked with me for another 15 minutes. And it wasn't even about the meter because he knows I have one and I know all about it. He wasn't trying to sell me anything. And he and Gemma were just the coolest people. I mean, they just took all that time talking with me, and I took a picture of them and I showed it. So it's a wonderful thing. I can't wait to go to the next one. I've got to save up some money and go to the next one. I really do. They're worth it. They're worth the money.
Yeah.
And this one, I had to go. I didn't have to buy the hotel room or the airplane ticket.
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
could almost
Perfect.
have ridden my bicycle there. That's how close it is. I took the car, but it was pretty close.
Pretty close. Wow. Well, good for you. That's such a cool experience. You realize, I'm sure you ran into Buzz and Bruce at some point at
Oh yeah.
just the most awesome people.
Yeah.
And you think these two dudes, they're retired, they, have financial wealth and they can go do whatever. And they used to
Yeah.
go do snorkeling trips. They
Right.
stopped all of that to only go to these conferences because it's so meaningful to them and their health. And I have to say, thank you so much on behalf of the woman who maybe felt like she was a little bit out of place in a kind of a new scene.
Mhm.
I try to do this. I never do it as much as I wish I would or I should. I really want to include more people and introduce myself to more people and hear more people's stories. Sometimes I walk away and there's so much of that learning going on that I forget that, like, I could have put my hand around somebody else or tried to
Right.
be a little bit more
Right.
kind or welcoming to somebody
Mhm.
who maybe felt a little bit out of place. So I'm so glad that you were able to do that. And it sounds like you had a wonderful experience. And yeah, I will just always say, yes, it's a sacrifice. A weekend where I go to a conference is a weekend that I sit in a conference center. I'm not on the beach. I went to San Diego in August, an awesome time to be in San Diego. I didn't go to the beach one time. Like, that's kind of a bummer. It's like my
Yeah.
favorite spot is the beach.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the money you spend, the work I miss, everything, all of it is worth it. It's so
Absolutely.
worth it. And you're just so fired up for months after that. So
You
I
are.
really,
And the notes I took, I have so many ideas for video lessons I want to share. So I'm paying this for. I want people who couldn't go. I'm going to tell you, here's what I learned. And I'm excited to share all of that. So this woman that we talked about, we talked for a while, and it was all the way out in the very front of the hallway. She was actually, I can sense that she was even like apprehensive to go in. She had two business cards, and she gave me her business cards. What a nice lady. And she said, well, what about the protein? And what about all the, in your kidneys? And she was asking me all the questions, the beginner questions that people ask
uh,
about, not, doing all that meat and not having all those, and then she was also concerned about the animals and the torture of the animals. And I said, I understand, but
mm,
so, you have to meet people where they are. Everybody's at a different spot on the line. And yeah, she was, and the people, some of the people who were in there were way ahead of me, So we're all on this little spectrum of learning and growing and changing and becoming healthier.